Next up, we have Matt with BCG to discuss new human-AI relationships in the age of agents.
Good morning. So I always like to start with this quote. I've spoken to probably about 350 boards, executive teams, CEOs for Fortune 500 companies about AI. And I always start here. Arthur C. Clarke said any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. And the reason why I start there is not that the AI researchers that are building these models can't tell you how they work, or that it seems like magic that this works, but it's actually really useful to hold in your mind this idea of how surprising AI can be. Because this is an exponential technology, we humans think linearly, we extrapolate linearly, and so we will always be surprised when the exponential curve bends away from the linear curve. So I like to just start with a little example. Maybe you recall, you might have seen these pictures. This was images from the first DALL-E model. This was magic at the time, 2021. This was the first time you could say, I could talk to a model, I could say, make me a chair that looks like an avocado, and I get these kind of lumpy images. 4 years later, I went, actually yesterday, went into Midjourney and said, make me a chair that looks like an avocado. And I got this with full motion video and me. That's 4 years. We're on this trajectory. Some of you may have read last year, Aschenbrenner from OpenAI wrote this paper, Situational Awareness, in which he extrapolates the power of the large language models. And he said there are three effects that are happening. One is we're exponentially increasing power of compute, or the amount of compute invested. We are improving the efficiency of the models, and we're doing what he called unhobbling, so basically creating sort of step changes in the way that the models work. And that these three trends together would give us, in 3 years, large language models and their equivalent that are 10,000 times more powerful than they are today. So think about 10,000 times more powerful than what you have in, say, ChatGPT today. That's the equivalent of PhD level expertise on every topic. And by the way, this was his prediction a year ago. We're on trend for the compute investment, and DeepSeek was an example of a big improvement in efficiency. The o1, o3 models, the Claude models are examples of the unhobbling and this step change in performance. So this is happening. So I think you're going to hear a lot about agents today and tomorrow. So what is an agent? An agent is a large language model, but with a couple of features that are added into the system. So one is some memory that has context. A big one is the idea that it plans. So you're using the reasoning capability of the large language model to come up with a plan of attack that responds to the environment. So it's adaptive. And then agents have tools, and so they can take action. So they create a plan, they use tools, interact with a database, interact with another piece of software, interact with a human, and then they assess the results and revise the plan. This means we can build tools now that respond to the environment, not just rule-based workflows, which is what we've had in automation so far. And so when we look at what we think this means for business, we see a change in the way that companies operate. Today, you have systems of record. You have your CRM, you have your ERP system, your accounting system, et cetera. And then you have the humans that are working in their jobs and they're interacting with these systems of record, to pull reports, to take action, et cetera. Tomorrow, what we see is a layer of agents sitting on top of the systems of record, and the humans interacting with the agent. And so now I can essentially delegate part of my job, in some cases, maybe all of my job, to those agents. I interact with the agent, it interacts with the system of record, it can pull information, it can take action. So, is this the office of the future? There are two things that we're seeing right now that are the challenges for businesses getting value. And maybe before I say that, we're doing a lot of work. BCG does work with the Fortune 500 companies around the world. We're doing a lot of work in AI, advising companies on what they should build, actually building solutions. And we've run this survey actually now for about 8 years, evaluating the maturity of companies on their AI capabilities. So this looks across their strategy, it looks across their people, operations, technology, data, et cetera. So there's about 1,000 companies that are in this benchmark. And right now, about 70% of them are below kind of baseline, so stagnating or emerging, early in their journey, not yet getting value. I talk to a lot of CEOs, and the first question they ask about AI is, has anybody got real value? Do we see in the P&L, do we see in the bottom line that AI has actually had an impact? And the answer is, it's too early, actually. Everybody is still investing. Last year there was a lot of experimentation. This year we're actually seeing companies really starting to build some solutions, but you're not going to get the value until a couple of years down the line. So we're early. The good news is the companies that are at the top of this curve, what we call VentureBeat, the ones that are most mature, are seeing substantial results. So 1.5 times more revenue growth, 1.8 times higher shareholder value. So there's value here, but we're early. So the first thing that we're seeing that companies need to do to really get advantage and create value with AI and with agents is figure out where to focus. We talk a lot about this framework, deploy, reshape, invent. And I think this is a really good way to think about, from a strategy perspective, where should you be focusing. So first is deploy. And this is, every piece of software that is in every business today is going to have AI and is going to have agents within the next couple of years. Or frankly, if you're a software company and you're not building AI and agents into your tools, you're not going to be around in a couple of years. It's going to be in everything. So that's great because I already own that software. I'm going to get that AI capability infused into the tools that I already have. However, my employees need to figure out how to use it. Many of you may be using things like ChatGPT. Many of you may be using things like Microsoft's 365 Copilot. We see a lot of organizations deploying these tools and then asking the question, why am I not seeing any value? So there has to be a focus on how do I get my people to use them effectively. The second area we see companies focus, and this is really right now where we're advising most of our clients to put their energy, is in this idea of reshaping functions, reshaping departments, reshaping workflows. And what I mean by this is looking at a process end to end, identifying where there is toil, a lot of human work that can be automated, redesigning the process so that I take out that work, and using AI to do that. Now, what's implicit in that is I actually have to redesign the process. If I just implement a tool, if I just give you a tool, if I just give you a chatbot, that hasn't changed the work. I haven't taken any work out. I haven't changed the way that work is done. And so I really have to rethink the work. And that actually takes effort, it takes investment. And so we're advising companies right now to focus on, find your 3 or 4 big rocks. If you have a big customer support organization, great, you should apply AI in customer support. It has a huge impact. If you have a big engineering organization, great, you should employ tools like Windsurf to reshape the way that you do engineering, software development. And then the third area of focus is on invent. And frankly, we're pretty early here. But if you think about it, 3 years ago, we did not have the ability to do the things that we can do with AI today. AI today, with a large language model, gives you the ability to have a conversation with software. So I can build into my products a conversational interface. That wasn't possible. Large language models understand the world. They know about every topic. So when I build software or I build an offering and I use a large language model, it can power all sorts of capabilities because it has a world understanding. These models have creativity. You can create avocado chairs and do all sorts of other things with them. And they have reasoning and the ability to plan. Those 4 things did not exist in software and technology before the transformer, before large language models. So look at your services and your products. Look at the way that you interact with the customers. How can you reinvent that using those capabilities? One example I like a lot is L'Oreal, the makeup company, launched a virtual beauty advisor. So this is an AI salesperson essentially, which you would think that's maybe not that interesting, but for them, they have niche products that have retail locations, and they have salespeople at department stores, et cetera. But they have mass market products where they do not have the ability to have salespeople. They can't scale people to that to cover those markets. Well, here they have a virtual salesperson that can sell to everybody. So it's reinventing the way that they think about interacting with their customers. The other thing that's important is to think about, how does AI change your business? So there's been a lot of focus the last couple of years on cost reduction, and I think that's just because that's where we are in the business cycle. Companies are focused on cost reduction, and AI seems to be it replaces workers so that I can reduce cost. But we shouldn't just focus there, because it also amplifies your existing humans. I don't necessarily have to reduce the number of people I have. Maybe I can actually dramatically increase their productivity. And this is actually what we're seeing in software development. I don't think that we're going to see companies laying off their software developers. I think we're going to see a massive explosion in the amount of capability and features that software companies are building. It also increases quality of work, and you can surpass human scale. There are applications where you would not have been able to do something. So for example, in the medical space, it's been proven that you can get much better outcomes for patients if you have preoperative follow-up with a nurse and postoperative follow-up to make sure that they're taking their medications, et cetera. But it's very expensive. So actually most healthcare organizations don't do it. But you can apply an AI nurse that does the pre-op and the post-op follow-up, and you get much better outcomes. So we can use AI to scale things that we wouldn't be able to afford to do with people. I want to just give you a little bit of evidence, because we are still early and we haven't seen this massive change in the economics based on AI, but I want to give you some evidence that it does actually work. So we did a study. This is BCG along with Harvard, Wharton, and MIT. We took 750 knowledge workers. They're actually our employees. Gave them first of all, a baseline test, and that's that top graph. And any group of humans, you're going to see a normal curve, a bell curve of performance. And then we gave half of them GPT-4, and half of them were not allowed to use a language model. And they gave them a task. And this task was, write a business plan, come up with marketing plans that are sort of a business school sort of activity. And as you would expect, the ones that had the AI model were faster. So they were 25% faster to execute. They got 15% more tasks done. But the surprising thing was that the quality of their output was 40% better than the ones not using the model. The other thing that was really interesting, and you see this in the chart, the bottom performers that were in the baseline, that's the yellow bars on the left, they performed just as well as the top performers when you gave them the model. So it actually brought everybody's performance up, including the bottom performers, which is very powerful because in most organizations you have a lot of new joiners, and the new joiners are less effective than the more experienced people. So it has the ability to increase time to proficiency. There's a challenge. These tools are fantastic, but the people aren't using them. So this is from the software development world. So we've been doing a lot of work in working with organizations to help them get their engineers, their software engineers, to adopt AI tools. And so here is a bank. They have about 10,000 software engineers. They launched GitHub Copilot. And over the next 4 months, we tracked performance. We tracked productivity of the engineers. The promising thing here is that the best engineers, the top 5%, doubled in productivity in 4 months. That's massive. We're not talking about 15%, 20% productivity lift. We're talking about 2x. And actually, it was clear that it could be much more than that. And in our own work, we find it's actually much higher than that. But the other interesting thing is 60% of the engineers had 0 improvement because they just didn't adopt the tool at all. And we see this again and again, where we deploy AI tools, you get the early adopters, they use it, they get great benefit, and then a bunch of people don't use it. And so this is really the big challenge that we're going to face in the coming years. And I want to give you a model for what's happening. This is very coding specific, but I think this will apply as we bring agents into all kinds of work. So when we look at software developers, there's sort of a ladder of automation. And each individual goes up this ladder. So I can have people at level 0, this is Luddites, they don't believe in AI, I don't want to use it at all. And they believe it or not, there are people that are in this camp. Most developers that we see, engineers, are at this level 1, which I call chat overflow. Essentially, they use ChatGPT instead of going to Stack Overflow to get questions answered. If you're a developer, you'll know what Stack Overflow is. That's great. I'm using a chatbot. It's helping me in my work. I ask it a question, it gives me an answer, but I'm not using it to do any of my work. So actually, my productivity doesn't go up, maybe a little bit. I do start to get productivity when I go to level 2, though. This is where now I'm actually chatting with the AI and asking it to write me code, and I'm copying code into my code base. So I'm now starting to actually use it to do some work. But I'm still thinking in code. I haven't changed the way that I think. I haven't changed, what I'm, how I'm working. To do that, I have to get to level 3, and this is where, so we just heard from Windsurf. This is where they're operating, level 3, level 4. At level 3, I'm not thinking in code anymore. I'm thinking in features. I'm prompting the AI agent to do my work. I'm describing what I want it to do, and it's writing the code. And when I am at this level, I can describe in 3 lines, say, of a prompt, and it'll generate 1,000 lines of code. That's a dramatic increase in productivity. But I don't get it unless I get to that level, and I don't get it unless I stop thinking in code and I start thinking in features. And level 4 is the vibe coding, full agentic. I just let it rip. I just tell it, here's a spec, and just go build something. So we're going to see this progression, again, whether you're talking about software engineering or you're talking about HR, or you're talking about legal, or you're talking whatever function it is that we're bringing AI agents into, we will see the humans progress up this level of automation, and you have to get to the higher levels before you're going to see the dramatic impact. So why won't humans adopt? I think there are 3 reasons. First is capability ignorance. They don't know that that the tools can do what they can do. This often takes the form of saying, yeah, I tried that AI tool and it didn't work very well. Okay, well, when did you try it? 6 months ago? I mean, these things are increasing. Remember back to the 10,000 times in 3 years. The capability is increasing exponentially. Try it again. So we need to get people just to understand how capable the tools are. The second is habit inertia. And this is, we're all humans. We have habits. It's very hard to break habits. We all like to work the way we work. I was talking to one engineer, and I said, why aren't you using AI tools? And he said, well, I'm a better coder than AI. I said, okay, maybe that's true. But 80% of the time, you're doing boilerplate and writing documentation and testing and things. I don't need your big brain to be doing that. Like, why don't you give that to the AI? And he said, well, yeah, but I like doing that stuff. I'm typing. I feel like I'm being productive. We have to change habits. And then the third thing is identity threat, and this is the hardest. I've had coders say, I'm a coder, I write code, that's what I do. And if this AI can write code for me, then who am I? What's my value? So we have to get people past this. And actually, the good news is, what we find is when you coach people through this, at the end they say, actually, this is great. I love working in this new way. I love working with the agents. I'm so much more powerful. But there's so much fear before they get there. So I want to leave you with 6 rules to overcome these issues, because I think this is going to be the real work of the next 3 to 5 years, is getting the people to use the agents. The first is get the right tool, put it in the right place, make sure that it's the right tool for the job and it's integrated with the way people work, and train them explicitly. Don't just give them a tool and expect them to figure it out. You have to tell them how to use it. The second, or the third and the fourth, are really about adoption. In the long run, everybody in an organization is going to see that the people that adopt these tools are the ones that are successful. But in the short run, that's not obvious. And so you need to measure adoption, you need to celebrate adoption, you need to celebrate the champions, the people that are actually actively using the tools, so that everybody else starts to see that, yes, I need to get on this bandwagon, this is going to be important. And then the last 2 go together. You have to ramp up scarcity, meaning I need to take away your resources. You need to do more. You need to do more with less. Otherwise, you're not going to change. You have habits, you're just going to keep doing things the way they are. So I need to actually expect much more from you. But it can't just be that, because if we just say, here's some AI, now go work really, really hard, that's a pretty lousy job. So we have to pair it with redesigning the work, and we do that with the people that are in the work, with the employees that are in the work. We look at the process. I talked about redesigning end to end, and we identify toil, where is there a lot of manual work that we can automate with AI, and where is there joy? What's the part where the human brings value? We minimize the toil and we maximize the joy. So at the end of the day, we're left with a much more efficient process, a much more efficient company, a much more productive workforce, and jobs that people like to be in. I'll close there. Thank you very much.